It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the heartland, that'll have you saying, "By George, I think he's got it." Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? Welcome back in to another podcast by George. Well, it's not spring yet, but it kind of feels like it at times. It's warming up and we get some cold weather. My God, in this part of the country, we had snow in May a couple of years ago, but we are seeing some 60-degree temperatures and everybody's wanting to get outside, and people have been getting outside because of the pandemic like they never have before. And I think we're going to see record numbers outdoors, and that's good this spring. A lot of people tend to go to the bike trails, myself included. You know, I ride a bike, but if you've ever been out on the bike trail, I got to tell people, if you're looking to go out there and walk, it may not be the best this spring. I mean, the weather's great, but they're called bike trails for a reason, folks. They're full of bicycles. And I don't know if you've ever seen anybody on a bike approach somebody walking, but you know, they'll wait till they're right on top of them, and then they'll yell on your left, and these people about jumping the ditch to get out of the way. It scares the crap out of them on the bike trail. And I always feel a little sorry for them. I got a little ring-ding bell on my bike that I ring when I get about, 50 yards away, hoping that they can hear it and maybe start to understand that there's somebody behind them. But there's always these bikers that are on the trail wanting to be Lance Armstrong, and they always scare the hell out of walkers. Well, there's a solution to that. There's an alternative, there's an option, and it's actually probably a better one. Go to a walking trail, go to a hiking trail, go to a park, and that brings us to today's guest. Joining us on the podcast by George Live Line is Matt Scott, an old buddy, an old pal that's got a website. He's got a business, an endeavor called Iowa Parklands, and it's very interesting, and it's something I think everybody ought to take into account and maybe consider this spring as we try to get outside, try to break this god-awful cabin fever caused by pandemic. Matt, welcome on into a podcast by George.
Well, thanks, George. It's good to see you again. And yeah, I can't wait to get back outside. The trail's a little muddy right now, but you can always find one to get on, that's for sure.
Well, to get us started here on Iowa Parklands, a lot of people know that there are state parks as an example. They know that the trails are available, but I think a lot of folks don't realize how accessible they are, how many there are, and how easy they are to get to. I talked about the bike trails. Folks have bike trails that are close to them, but it's not that hard to get to a park, right?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I focus primarily on state parks, but you know, that's because it's a manageable project at that scale. I think there's something like, depending on who you ask, you know, there's 63 state parks, I believe, somewhere around there. And, you know, if you count all the recreation areas, state forests and state parks, I think there's something like 98. But you can amplify that by going to your city parks or county parks. I mean, there's just hundreds when you start looking at it at that scale. So yeah, there's really no excuse not to hit a trail, and they're everywhere. And I'm talking like, you know, your old school dirt path, single track trails that you can, you know, you find yourself in a canopy of trees or in a prairie preserve. So yeah, just about, or along a river, you know, a lot of them circle around a man-made lake of some sort. Lots of picturesque views.
Done that myself, and it makes me think also, we're just a couple of months, believe it, away, maybe 3 months away from mushroom hunting. So that's another, maybe you want to try that this year. And again, this would be a great opportunity to do that. Well, let's say I've got somebody's interest piqued, Matt, and they go to iowaparklands.com. I want to bring this up on the screen. So, okay, so here we are, and maybe just give us a little primer here. What would you suggest somebody that's landing on the website for the first time, wanting to go out to a state park, maybe for the first time to go out and try a walk or a hike this spring? What would you suggest they do?
Well, I'd suggest you go to the parks section on the top menu there.
Sorry, yep. Yeah, there we go.
Yep. And you can just scroll through that. And these are parks I've actually been to. So what I tried to do is, you know, you can go online and find pretty much the same description of every park, which a lot of them have gotten information from the DNR. You can find a few interesting documents about parks that, you know, geologists have written up, or friends of groups have talked about. Those are give you some more firsthand information. But what I really tried to do is get out into the parks and write what I saw and kind of described it. Focusing on trails specifically. So, there may be some interesting water features and that type of thing. That's not really my wheelhouse. I'm kind of the hiker guy. So if you really want to know about the parks or about the trails, I've got a description on every single one of these parks. And there's actually some more at the bottom. They just kind of continue on.
Yeah, let's pick one of these. Let's say somebody's coming in from interstate, landing at the Des Moines International Airport. It's called International because some guys go fishing up in Canada and fly in and out every year. That's my joke for the Des Moines International Airport. Well, let's say they want to check out a park here. Well, here's one that I wouldn't think. I played golf there, and I mean this is again very close to Des Moines as an example. Jester County Park, and we've got the Reedmore. See if I can get this to open. Here we go. So this is Jester. So take us through your impressions and what you would tell people about Jester Park.
So yeah, Jester's a county park. It's kind of the one of the few county parks I've written about and created some trail maps for. But it's an interesting park. There's a lot going on there. I mean, there is a lot going on there. You can go there for a day and still not see everything and do everything. I think one of the more interesting things I found out about Jester is there is a heck of a lot more trails than I realized. To the south of the park, there's an entire trail system. Primarily, it's dedicated to horse, equestrian riding, but
right.
Anyone can go on it, assuming that the lake is not flooded. And a lot of those would be underwater if the lake was flooded. But the other cool thing about Jester is that, it's a manageable size trail system. It's kind of a nice little maze of trails through forested areas, but they're not super long. It's a good way to get into hiking and feel like you actually did something for the day. And they're not extremely long. I love that park. I go there all the time for photo opportunities and, get some shots of wildlife and whatnot. But so when I'm hiking, I try to get an impression and try to point out things that, most of the descriptions I see online would not talk about. Like there's a bird blind there. There's some, interesting, some of the trails are actually fire trails that were used initially, not at Jester specifically, but sometimes I'll stumble upon like an old cistern or an old farmhouse or an abandoned trail. I think those kinds of things are really interesting to come across when you're hiking, and you don't really hear about them, and it gives people a reason to like, oh, I want to go see that and get out on the trail and take a look at it. So I'll point those out on my maps and in my descriptions as I go. So go ahead.
No, I not to interrupt, but talk about the maps a little bit, because when we're looking at the site, we see that you have maps for sale, you have bandanas for sale, several different products. But when I think of Iowa Parklands, I think of these maps, because if you've never been to the park before, you may not want to do it because where do I start? Where do I go? I'm afraid I'm going to get lost. I'm afraid I'm not going to be in the right place or see the right things. I want to make the best use of my time. And of course, the maps are meant to do that. And I've seen the maps. They're kind of a layman's map. We're not talking sophisticated, hard to figure out and decipher mapping here. I mean, you don't have to have a sextant to figure these maps out. I mean, it's kind of like follow the dots type of mapping.
Yeah, I tried to balance it out between, your elaborate topo maps that you might hike, the Sierras with, and something that was a little more detailed than, what I was finding online. So I actually hike all these trails with a GPS, and I take that information and overlay it onto accurate maps and create my graphic map. And so then I create two different maps from that. One, I'll create like a colored map that you can print out. And then I typically use that map data to create, in some cases, like a trail map bandana that would be in black and white. The maps that I have on my site, the printable ones, they're, I charge like a small fee for those, 99 cents. I know you can get them for free, but you're not going to find them as accurate as these. And with all the descriptions that mine have. that's what you were saying too, is I try in the descriptions, I try to give people options. Like you said, if you've never been there and you want to make the most out of your day, I'll talk about things like what's the least traveled trail, the least busy trail, because I don't like to be on a trail that's like a conga line. I'd rather go to an interesting place in the park that not many people go to. Talk about what they're best used for, things like that. I'll try and give people tips, interesting sites along the way too. I do have several maps that you can purchase, but I have quite a few that are free. And that project came from last year, was the 100th anniversary of the Iowa State Park System. So I worked with the Iowa Walking Club at Ames to create 20 hikes in 2020 and 20 parks. And those are all free. Those are based on the Iowa Walking Club. They had some parameters for these things. I think there's a 5K and a 10K walk on each of those parks. And I offer those on my site for free as well. So you can get 20 free maps if you like, if you're opposed to doing the purchase thing. But the purchase thing is just mostly to cover my expenses to go do this. That's not a huge money maker for me, but I do sell other items that are a little more margin for myself and my business.
Oh, you're talking a 5K walk. That was the other thing I wanted to bring up to folks again that are thinking about getting out, maybe for the first time and doing this type of thing. You don't have to be a marathon runner. I mean, you don't have to be Ewell Gibbons to use these maps and enjoy the state parks. You can go out there and just do as much as you can. You don't have to do the entire circuitous route. You can, walk in and turn around and walk back out if you want to, see as much as you want and call it a day. So it's a really great program that you have. And I think maybe the most creative thing, other than the maps, is the bandanas that you have, because if you'll always have your map with you if you have one of these bandanas. Now I'll bring this up and show it on screen. But before we leave the idea of the maps, if as long as you've got a map, and what do you recommend, a compass, and I don't know, if people are hiking, maybe they should have their cell phone with them. I mean, you're pretty much good to go if you just have those things, some water.
Yeah. I mean, in Iowa, you don't really have to be too concerned with getting lost on the trail. The only place that I actually felt like I might be in some trouble was when I hiked Shimmick State Forest down in southeast Iowa. That's I believe it's the largest contiguous track of forested land in the state. And I was hiking the equestrian trails. Actually, I was biking them, and fell down a ravine, and so I found myself on my back with my bike on top of me. And I could have yelled as loud as I wanted, and no one would have come to my rescue. So, I did have my cell phone with me, and there was some spotty cell phone reception, but fortunately I just got the wind knocked out of me and I was able to brush myself off and go. But if it was dark too, and you didn't know the trail system there, it might take you a while to get out of that maze. So there is a potential to get lost in some of Iowa's trail systems, but for the most part, you're pretty close to, a trailhead if you're in one of Iowa's park systems. Some other larger systems would be the Les Hills and maybe Stevens State Forest, Yellow River State Forest. I think those are called our great straight forests.
Well, that's all good. It's a great idea, and I'm reminded I saw one time that Houston, I believe it was Houston, was considered to be the city in the United States that has the biggest obesity epidemic. And it's because, folks, they don't even have sidewalks down there because of the heat and humidity. I mean, nobody walks. And it's bad for your health. It's bad for your girth, folks. Anybody just getting out and walking, and there's this forest bathing angle that I've had on the podcast before, where people are actually doing their hearts and souls and minds a lot of good by getting outdoors. And this is the spring to do it. Boy, if we ever needed it, if we ever needed to visit a park and take one of Matt's maps and get out there and hike a little bit, this is the year.
Well, I'll tell you what. Yeah, first of all, correct that. It's called the major state forest in Iowa, and I think there's a set of minor state forests that are smaller. But yeah, that's honestly why I got into this. It was as much to do with fitness and mental health as it was just as a, interesting hobby, I found it to be one of the most helpful things for my mind and body that I've ever done is hiking. I absolutely, for me, I can't imagine how it wouldn't work for anybody, but there's just nothing like it. Honestly, you're preoccupied with nature and the sounds, and it's hard not to forget anything that's on your mind if you're out there hiking like that. And, not to mention, I mean, I've read article after article. I'm definitely not a doctor or anything like that, but, we're not designed to move and sit and kind of atrophy in a chair all day. Our bodies are designed to move. And, the more you can do that, the better you're going to feel. That's just the way our bodies work.
Well, the point that I make to people, we call them dumb animals, but your household pets, they sit with their faces pressed up against the glass looking outdoors all the time. You think, well, they just went out. And I don't understand that because they're indoor pets. They never get out. No, they know even if they can't get outside, just looking at it is good for them. I mean, it makes them feel better. I mean, those are dumb animals. So, I mean, if we're going to be smart, we got to get out and do this type of thing. And this is the year for it. And I just think it's a great thing that you're doing, Matt. I tell people all the time on the podcast, when I started this, it wasn't so that people could hear and see me. I'm not that interesting and I'm not that talented, but I know people that are, and you're one of them, and this website and these products. And I mean, it's just a great thing. I want to wrap up here. We've run out of time already. Maybe give you a little closing thought here, what you want to tell people about Iowa Parklands or encourage them to get involved.
Well, there's more to come from Iowa Parklands. I'm constantly hiking trails. What I typically do is hike during the summer and work during the winter on new maps. So that means I've got a series of new maps coming up. So I've got plenty more going on. I've got looking to try and hit Stevens State Forest and Les Hills and see if I can get those under my belt and hopefully create a trail guide of some of the larger trail systems this year. So
that's great. Yeah. Well, I mentioned mushroom hunting season coming up. I want to kind of do a little advancer on that. We will have Professor Salamani from Iowa State University coming back on Podcast by George to give us a preview of the season coming up. Before you know it, it comes up quickly. It's just a couple of 3 months away. But that's going to do it for this one. Matt, thanks for coming on Podcast by George and talking about Iowa Parklands.
Well, thanks, George. I appreciate it. It's fun.
Folks, if you like Podcast by George, please, follow along on Facebook. We've got a big audience there. They watch the videos on Facebook, on YouTube, starting to build a little bit. I mean, it's starting to grow very slowly on YouTube, and want to encourage everybody to continue to listen along. We just passed the 20,000 download threshold in audio from our syndicator. So Podcast by George is growing slowly but surely. But that's going to do it for today. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is. And there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.